Welcome to Real Life Fiction. I'm Matt James with Conundrum Publishing, international best-selling author of The Blood King. And today I'll be talking to USA Today best-selling author ERNEST DEMPSEY. Ernie, thanks for coming on this show. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah. No, it's we've hung out before. Had a great time in Disney with the families before, but really being able to sit down and talk versus text or message, it's just a completely different experience, and it's just a lot more fun. So I'm really happy to have you on.
For sure. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. So, for those that might, maybe see your name, but they're not overly familiar with your work, or people that might just be stumbling on to you for the first time, just kind of give us a brief overview on, who ERNEST DEMPSEY is.
Wow. Nobody's ever really said it that way. I'm a little distracted because my cat's down here and I don't want to pick my tripod. So I'm Ernest Dempsey, and I'm a cat lover. Apparently,
Apparently,
I write archaeological thrillers and action thrillers, and now urban fantasy and paranormal thrillers with an archaeology spin. And I've been doing it since 2008. I published my first book in 2010, and so really wish I had muted all of these alerts that I'm getting on my phone right now, but it's too late. So it's like vibrating and popping up on the screen.
I put my cell phone on silent, so it wasn't doing that. But
yeah, I could do that. I wonder if it'll kill the record. I don't think it'll kill it.
I don't think it'll kill it. Yeah, no, you're fine. No, yeah. So you also were a little bit of a musician back in the day, and you still do play a little here and there. But that's
very little. I just in my office. Sometimes
Yeah. Yeah, but you and I actually have some similar traits in that. Is I was in a band for 6 or 7 years playing drums, and I say tour, but we traveled up and down South Florida playing a bunch of different gigs, and some dive bars, some bigger places.
Yep.
I got to open for Black Flag on a reunion tour.
No way.
Yeah, so I got to hang out with Henry Rollins.
Come on, wait a minute.
Yeah, Henry Rollins, Keith Morris. So basically what it was is they were having a reunion tour, and Henry and Keith, who were the two lead singers in different eras of the band, got together and decided to do a reunion tour, and both of them sang, and they rotated songs. And they toured with a one band, which was Against All Authority, and they had 3 local bands at every stop open for them. So they only had one consistent touring band, which I thought was a really cool way of doing it. And we got hooked up through Against All Authority. They knew somebody in the scene that was friends with us. And, they said, hey, these guys are a punk rock and roll band. They'll fit right into the crowd. And, we were the first band, lead-off band, and it was actually pretty fun because it was the biggest crowd I had ever played for. It was it was awesome. And then Henry watched every single song of every single opening band.
I've heard he does that.
He's a cool dude. And watching him warm up, watching him just be himself, which is exactly what you see when he's on stage. He's just a wild man, and he's like. And then now with the media and the stuff that he does, he's a very genuine human being, and he's just a really, really cool guy.
Oh yeah, and he's brilliant.
Oh, he's fantastic. He's fantastic.
He's a genius poet.
Mm-hmm.
He's a genius student of history and culture and all that stuff. It's strange that somebody who does what he does in the way that he does it is such a Renaissance man, because on the outside people just they'll see the singer and the screamer and the
and the high energy guy, but then when he's talking and he's doing his spoken word tours, he's so calm and collected and reserved and professional, I guess you'll call it. And he was a cool guy.
That's awesome. I'm jealous.
Yeah, but you were a singer, so I mean, I was the background guy. I was the just trying to keep time, trying to keep rhythm.
Yeah, I think that I mean, we played for the biggest show we ever did was in 2001, and we opened for Rascal Flatts, which was cool because
Yeah.
they had just won their first CMA award, and we weren't a country band, but they're more like rock and roll than.
Yeah.
I mean, their live show is very rock and roll. They did a Boston cover
Nice.
for crying out loud and nailed it because their singers got such high range. But
Oh yeah.
but that was cool. I mean, it was cool to meet them and hang out with them. It was really funny because I think their drummer was a hired gun. Like I think their core is like 3 guys.
Yeah, it's just the 3 guys usually. I mean, they have a lot of guys that have been playing with them for a long time,
Yeah.
but it's yeah. The band is the 3 of them.
Yeah, well, so it was interesting. The guy that was playing drums with them at the time, we're backstage after the show or whatever, and they're hanging out between the buses and all that, and we didn't have a bus. That was like our home venue. Basically, it was here in Chattanooga. But yeah, their drummer and his sister came up to me and like one of her friends, and they said, "Could we get your autograph?" And I was like, "What?" And their road manager and his wife, they wanted autographs too. And I was like, "But you're touring with Rascal Flatts. Like, why do you
Yeah.
want my autograph?" It was really funny. I signed more autographs that night than I've ever signed in my life. It was really cool. And it was neat to see such a long line of people like waiting.
That would be an interesting experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was 4,000 or 5,000 people. They said more people saw us that night than Travis Tritt the night before.
Wow.
Because of who we were opening for. I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
but it was a neat experience. A little nerve-wracking back then. Like now, I don't really care if I'm in front of a huge crowd, but back then it was kind of terrifying. Like you didn't want to screw up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. That's the thing is, I wasn't terrified of the crowd. I was terrified of screwing up.
But
It
you
wasn't.
screw up in front of more people, it's worse. Like if you
Yeah,
screw up in front
yeah,
of one person, you joke with them afterwards, but then if it's like 500 people or 1,000 people or more, it just amplifies that.
yeah. Well, especially if you're semi-serious with what you're doing and you're trying to grow it.
Yeah,
Just like we do now, where you're trying to grow a brand, you're trying to grow a business, and especially when you're on stage and you screw up. I mean, that just sets you back. That could set you back forever.
oh yeah, yeah. We opened for Driving and Crying one time, and I love that band, but they were the most keep to themselves guys. I mean, I said something to them backstage, and they were just basically like ignored me, and their crowd. It was so funny because wherever we went and played like one of their covers, like Straight to Hell or one of those things, the crowds would go crazy for Driving and Crying. And I guess they're a Georgia band, and so around this region they're just hugely popular. But the night we opened for them, it was like everybody had taken barium and lithium at the same time, and we're just like, it was the deadest, most vapid looking audience I've ever seen. Like I was like, "You guys ready for Driving and Crying?" And it was like,
Uh,
I'm like, what is going on here? Like I loved it. I'm excited to like be on the same stage with these guys, and
yeah.
this band is awesome. I love their songs, and everybody was just kind of like, meh.
It must be because a lot of the time is like, I mean, I can't tell you how many like shows I've been to, with like local bands and stuff, and then big concerts too. It's all about the presence on stage for these guys. It's like if they look bored, the crowd is going to be bored.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's honestly what it is. That's why you see guys like, I think I've seen Dierks Bentley 3 or 4 times, and his show's amazing because he's the energy. He's got this great, you can tell he loves doing it even after all the years he's done it. Zach Brown band's the same way. You see him, this massive show, but it's so fun. And because the band is having a great time on stage, and some bands, it's like they're just kind of like, it's a job for them. And it relates to the crowd where you're like, wow, these guys are bored. Now I'm bored. Because now you're like, okay, now what am I doing? I'm just watching these guys. I'm not actually like a part of it. We're being entertained, I guess.
Yeah, half of it is acting. Like
It
that's
is.
people think that I'm this sanguine, outgoing uh, person that loves attention and loves to be the focus of attention and all that. And the truth the truth is far from that. I actually, whenever I would finish a show, I would just want to go backstage and hide for like an hour, decompress, or go up to the manager's office and hang out for an hour and just chat baseball or whatever.
Sure.
What I would do was sit on the front of the stage and shake hands and hug people and thank people for coming out. But it's all, not that that's an act. I'm genuinely appreciative that they came, but the act is that I'm being super sociable and really I just want to go hide. But you have to put the act on, this, look like the rock star and be the rock star. People don't, people think that melancholy folks are interesting and mysterious and all that, but it's not fun to watch melancholy.
No,
It's
no.
fun
That's
to
why
watch.
you see a guy like perfect example is Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
You want
Yeah.
one of the more intelligent human beings, one of the most
Brilliant.
well-spoken human beings, brilliant guy, but so laid back and easygoing. And then he's on stage and he's Alice Cooper. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it really is. It's a complete act. And but I guess the true professionals are the ones that just, they know how to turn it on and off,
Yeah.
and
I reached out to Alice Cooper year and a half ago, because he's a huge golfer. And so I saw he was coming into Chattanooga between bigger stops like Nashville, Atlanta type stops, or Knoxville, Atlanta type stops. And a lot of musicians do that. They'll scoop up some extra money by popping into Chattanooga, and on the way from one place to another. They'll do like a Wednesday show here. So I reached out to his management and asked if he wanted to play golf here at the course where I live. Never got a response, but I was like, I'm not going to get to play with Alice Cooper if I don't ask. So
Exactly.
I want to ask, at least ask. And they say no, screw off, or whatever, weirdo. Fine. It's his loss, because we have tremendous, our greens are some of the best. So
it's Alice Cooper's loss. It's not Ernie's loss.
I mean, there's a deeper layer to why it's his loss. I know a lot about Alice Cooper. I say a lot, but I know things about Alice Cooper. I follow him a little bit. I liked his music. I like his spiritual journey. I like a lot of things about him. He's missing out because he doesn't know anything about me or even who I am. And I think he would really enjoy, getting to know those things.
Oh, I'm sure.
So it is
from personal experience. I can say that he missed out on a lot hanging out with Mr. Ernest Dempsey. I mean, he missed out big time. So
You're not missing out now.
no, sometimes there's regrets, but no, it is kind of funny. Is my girls always talk about the Disney trip that we shared, and they because I have an Aura frame, the one, the digital frame that flips through.
Yeah.
And, I actually have quite a few pictures from that weekend on it, and it'll pop through, and there'll be pictures
cool.
of our girls together. And my little one Daisy always asks me about her, about your daughter, and when are we going to do that again? That was fun, and blah blah blah. Like I'm like, oh, I mean, and then I have pictures of you and me on here. It was fun times. It was a memorable weekend for me. I thought it was a great weekend.
It was awesome.
It was a great weekend walking around Food and Wine Festival with you guys, and but so books. Obviously, this is kind of
this has been band talk for half an hour, 20 minutes, 15.
Like I said pre-show, there is no real format, real rules to these shows. I have talking points, but that doesn't mean we're going to get to them or in what order.
Right.
This may be a tough question for you because you're so deep into the series, 22 books now. But can you give us just a little bit of who Shaun Wyatt is?
Well, so the
nuts and bolts, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts is Shaun Wyatt's a former government agent with a redacted agency that reports and answers only to the president of the United States. But now he works as an artifact recovery specialist and security specialist with International Archaeological Agency based in Atlanta, which is a fictional agency I came up with. All those agencies are fictional. And so he and his best friend who founded the agency are always traveling the world trying to uncover more, uncover lost artifacts or unravel mysteries. And usually what happens is something happens to someone because the villain is usually the one that's looking for something first, or maybe they find something and it just so happens that the villain is also looking for the same thing. But the nuts and bolts of Sean Wyatt as a character, as a person, are that he's a guy with a past, with a violent past, obviously, and sometimes that violent past and the training he's been through and his experiences come in handy. But deep down, he's got deeper issues that he struggles with, and over time, some of those issues have come to light, and other issues are still yet to come to light. But he's a hero in that in the traditional sense, in that he's the good guy and he tries to stand up for what's right. But there's pieces of anti-hero to him as well, because he eventually in one of the books kind of comes face to face with the fact that he almost likes the violence. Like that's almost always his default solution.
Sure.
And so and that's a struggle, and it's a struggle that we see playing out right now in society here, especially in the United States, where you have evil people with evil intentions committing violent acts against innocent people on the streets, and in big cities especially, but also here, in the suburbs, and we've seen an increase in crime and things of that nature, and so somebody like Sean, their default is to shut it down, the best way he knows how, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so is that always the best solution, or will that solution create more pushback from the other side? So he doesn't have the demons in the traditional sense that you read about with heroes like this, where they see the faces of the people they've killed and they have these regrets and things of that nature. I based him more on a real person that I know. A lot of his characteristics are mine, but one of the characteristics that I built into him was a Marine that I know who became a police officer, and he had to shoot somebody in the line of duty, killed this person. They questioned him about it. They always put you through a psychological evaluation after something like that.
Yeah.
And the psychologist was disturbed at the lack of how doing this actually affected. Like, it didn't impact him at all. He was completely normal, and not just having no regrets, but also just almost apathetic to it, right? Like, it was just something I did. It was like he just picked up a bottle of water and took a drink, and that was the effect it had on his life. And so there's something to a person like that, right? There's you could say it's they've absorbed the training more than other people, or they've accepted their role as the sword more than any other people, and that's just who they are. Or is there something else to it? Is there a darkness that lurks within? And I think that there's a darkness within all of us. And sometimes, and as writers, we can let that darkness out. And sometimes it scares people. Like with my Crimson Winter, like with Gideon Wolf, Crimson Winter coming out on April 28th. Plug.
As of recording, this your book will be out tomorrow.
Yeah.
As of recording.
So,
Yeah.
But people are like, this is a lot more violent than anything you've done, and I don't really. Some people are put off by the violence, but we all have a dark side. How deep does the dark side go? And for me, I do have that dark side, but I try to use the dark side for good, right?
Hmm.
So like when you look, this is what I've been commenting to people a lot lately when I look at like the crime thing, the massive crime that happened in Chicago last weekend, or like what's
Yeah.
going on in New York
Every weekend.
or out west. Yeah, all
Yeah.
this stuff. I'm like, this is how you get Batman, right? Like
Yeah.
this is how Gotham happens and how Batman comes about, like vigilantes. And for me, if it's a dark side to kind of wish that we had a vigilante like Gideon Wolf or a Batman type, then okay, I accept that as my dark side, but I feel like that dark side is aligning with good and not evil because they're trying to protect the innocent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, 100%. And I get it. I've had some characters with, I guess we'll call it the cliched demons from serving in the military and that kind of stuff.
sure.
But that's all about just, like the character building of it all. And honestly, if you don't do it, well, I guess it's kind of, if you don't do it, it just really kind of hurts the realism of the character that we are trying to create. Because, it's not all, I guess you would say like bells and whistles, and it's not all happy when you're doing what you're doing, especially if you have a guy that's like a, counterterrorism operator, or, like a Mossad operative, like in my newer book that's coming out, where he's a Kedon and his job is to kill people. And, it's one of those things where, it's what side of the killing are you on? Are you doing it for duty, or does a little bit of you actually enjoy taking out these people because they are horrific? So it's like, so yeah, you're doing it for the good, but it's also how it creeps in and becomes something a little more than just like, are you enjoying it versus I'm doing it and then walking away. And like you said, having a character that has a little bit of that different in his mentality, where like the violence is something that they not necessarily get off on, but it's something that maybe they go a little more over the top with the bar fight. Like we've seen that in movies and in books where a guy will be very quick to harm somebody or hurt somebody, but he's not doing it in a evil way. It's just he's doing it because that's just what he, it's like his tendencies.
Yeah.
It's like, did he have to break the guy's arm, or could have he just subdued him?
Right. Or did Gideon Wolf, did he need to kick that guy's head and, rip it clean off of the person's torso and, send it sailing down the road and then make the comment wide right after
Yeah.
the cornfield? No, he didn't have to do that. But
Yeah.
there's something about I think that one of the foundations of that character, the Gideon Wolf character, more so than the Sean Wyatt character,
Sure.
and Dak Harper too. The thing about Gideon Wolf is different than those two guys in that his methods are intentional, in that sort of like in the movie Swordfish, right? Did you ever see Swordfish?
Yeah.
They had the black cell with Travolta and Halle Berry. And thank you for that swimming pool scene. But the yeah, so they, the black cell in that film exists because its purpose is to make terrorism so unthinkable that it will stop, right? So like Travolta said, you bomb a church, we bomb 3 mosques, right? Or whatever. Maybe that's not right? Like maybe you shouldn't be attacking somebody's holy, places of worship. But the point of it is to make evil unthinkable, right?
Yeah.
So the way that I've designed this character with Gideon Wolf, and we were talking about Sean earlier, and I've just diverted onto this subject.
Yeah.
But with Gideon, the whole purpose the whole foundation of his character is to make evil and acts against the innocent so unthinkable that people will stop, right? That they'll have no choice because they will be so terrified. And the monster that he becomes through the power of this medallion that he discovered, and this creature that he shifts into when he's fighting bad guys, isn't just a cool special effect, and it's not just a cool suit that he puts on. It's also the metaphor built into it. It's the metaphor is that it takes a monster to suppress monstrous acts, right? To prevent monstrous things from
who
doing,
understands it better than a
happening.
Monster?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so when you hear when there's people are sitting around a fire or sitting around a bar, and they're talking about, did you hear what happened to this cartel boss? No. What happened? It was a monster that killed him, right? And it was horrible how he was. Really, what do you? Yeah, this thing hunts down cartel guys, and it hunts down criminals that do this and this, and so it's got that whole ghost story thing built into it, and its design is intentional in that you want to make committing acts of evil and violent crimes so unthinkable that you don't think about doing them anymore, right?
Yeah, you're subduing them with fear at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, that's a killer way to look at it, honestly. Yeah, I didn't, no pun intended. But so you mentioned him in passing, and I know this is a series that you are particularly very fond of. I mean, we're all fond of our own work, I guess. But when I'm talking,
Not me. I don't like anything that I write. I think the ideas are cool, but
yeah, is Relic Runners, Dak Harper, and I know you were super excited when you first started putting the stories together, and then released them to they were well received, and I'm happy for you for that. But kind of give us a rundown on him, because I do the same thing, and this is probably more of a peel back the curtain type of thing, where we are content creators and we have specific content that our series doesn't deviate from. Like I have my Jack Riley series, which is more straight-laced action adventure, action thriller. I have my Zara Kane series, which is kind of Jack on steroids, because I am willing to go a little bit more over the top with content and or the themes of the stuff. Where Jack, I try to keep it a little bit more, I guess we'll call it realistic. And I have a couple other things that I'm working on that I am going to go just full on over the top, because I don't do it in any other series, and I want to do it. I want to, like your Gideon series, you don't write that kind of character typically, and I know it's kind of well, I want to. It's just, where do I do it? And and I know, at least for me, when I start a new series, it's kind of well, I'm not doing this type of book in this series, so why don't I just start a new series, and that's what the theme of that is going to be. And but with your Dak Harper stuff, I'm a fan of it anyways, and just kind of give us a little rundown on who Dak is too, and just kind of the deviation of him versus a Sean and that kind of stuff.
Dak Harper is a former Delta Force operator who was betrayed by his team, and when they discovered a treasure hoard in the Middle East, and it turns out that he wasn't just betrayed by his team; his commanding officer was part of the whole thing too. If he had gone along with it and they had looted that treasure trove and sold it on the black market, he probably would have been left alone, and he wouldn't have had any much of this stuff happening to him. And but that doesn't make for a very good story. So Dak Harper is driven by a strict moral code. He struggles because he's had to separate himself from the woman he loves, who lives in Istanbul and is a cyber tech kind of person, cybersecurity tech kind of person. He's had to distance himself from her because he's a man with a target on his back. Mm-hmm. And so to make money, he stumbled upon, or this kid stumbled upon him. He stumbled upon this kid who's a eccentric video game millionaire who initially in the books was only like 12 years old, but he has sort of this desire to locate missing or stolen artifacts on the dark web. And so he finds these things in the antiquities black market, which is a very real thing, by the way. Like I was shocked to learn how big it really is.
Mm-hmm.
And so
is art.
Yes, art and antiquities black market, and he deals in both. And so, in fact, the new book, Thief's Honor, is the one I'm working on right now. It's dealing with a stolen painting, a stolen Rembrandt. So, which is very real. Like this is dealing with a real painting. All of the things that he's looking for, usually, I don't think there was a fictional one yet. I think they're all real things. So, so he's I've kind of laid the foundation for like where he comes from and what he's about. But one of the biggest things with Dak, though, is he has a strong sense of justice, and vengeance goes hand in hand with that justice, right? Yeah. So again, a lot of the things he does is violent, hunts down the guys that betrayed him. And some people that don't like that sort of mindset might say, well, why would somebody do that? It sounds like he's just a sociopath. And well, if you don't think that you could ever live in peace, and you don't believe that the person you care most about could ever live a peaceful and safe and happy life because there's a threat still out there, then you would do what you had to do to make sure that threat was no longer around.
Yeah, especially when you are who you are and you're who you used to work for. You can only hide for so long.
That is correct. And so that's who he is and who he starts out as. But then as he takes on this job hunting down these artifacts, he finds himself in sort of a savior role, an unanticipated savior role for other people. Because there are always, like in the first book, The Courier, there's an illegal gold mining operation that goes on in Peru. It's a huge deal down there. Mm-hmm. And it effectively utilizes slave labor and sort of like you'd almost say indentured servitude type labor in many situations. A lot of the people they use are living in total squalor. And it operates very much like a cartel would. Yeah. And so I put Dak into that scenario where he's trying to find this artifact held by this person who is also oppressing these people. So these people need his help. He also needs to find this artifact. And that's sort of the model that I worked with for the first 5 books. And book 6 takes a turn to a slightly different situation, different scenario. And I think people are really going to enjoy it. But and then there's the constant threat of his former commanding officer through the first 5 books that somehow has evaded him over the years, and he's been unable to find him. And this guy continues to send assassins after Dak, and so there's all that stuff going on. But yeah, one of the book 5, Moscow Sky, the last one that I did, was really interesting because it's based on real events that are still happening in Ukraine right now. And whether you think that our involvement in Ukraine is good or bad or whatever, it's completely irrelevant regarding this story. What happened in Ukraine when the Russians invaded was several of their groups went straight for museums and started looting museums. And one such museum was the National Historical Museum there that has a crazy amount of Scythian gold artifacts from the Scythian Empire. And the reports that I read and the articles that I read said that a team of Russian military broke into the museum. They found the curator. They told her, you have to tell us where you've hidden, the gold, because we know there's gold here and now we don't see it. So where is it? She wouldn't tell them. So then they tortured her. She still wouldn't tell them, because the Ukrainians feel very tied to all these things. These are part of their history and culture. And if you remove those things, then you remove that history and culture, right? Then it just
Yep.
becomes oral tradition, and oral tradition can always be challenged or questioned, right?
Yep.
And so these are really important pieces of their history. And she wouldn't give it up. And then eventually they found these things hidden in boxes down in the basement. And so that's where the reality kind of leaves off. And so Moscow Sky picks up from there. And what would Dak Harper do, right?
Sure.
So he gets sent over there. He puts together a team to help him with, tracking this rogue Russian unit down. And I think that story is so cool because it's still unfolding, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't know where some of these artifacts have been taken, or many of them. We don't know, if they're out of the country now, if they're in Moscow now, if like some of these guys like took off on their own and just like went AWOL against their own military. So it's a fascinating subject. It's also really sad, but
Kind of like Kelly's Heroes, right? With the Clint Eastwood and Telly Savalas and Don Rickles, where they go behind enemy lines to loot this bank because they're sick of the war and they're kind of rebelling against their commanders.
Yeah.
And then they disappear into the sunset as, wealthy, basically wealthy bank robbers.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, they're not even good guys. They do, because they do save like a village and they do save a people and stuff. But you're just like, wow, they're going AWOL from the United States military while also robbing a bank. You're just like, but it's
What a
fun.
great,
What a
that's
great.
a great reference, though. That's a good deep cut.
Yeah. Oh, I love that movie. That was one of my favorite movies growing up. My dad was a big fan of a lot of those actors, old school,
Oh, yeah.
Donald Sutherland, and,
Oh, for sure.
playing eight ball, and you had some really really good actors in that movie. But it's kind of a great story concept too, considering when it was made too. It feels like more of a modern day story concept versus something that was 40, 50 years ago. But
Yeah.
so as a writer, we give our thanks to blank for giving us the interest in this kind of stuff, and like our influences, and kind of like why I have always been I've had a deep fascination with ancient history and that kind of stuff, and I have since I was as young as I can remember. And then you also realize, at least here in the States, our country's very young, considering, and we don't have ancient history. We have history, but we don't have. When I read about something that was found, it's 3,500 years old and blah blah blah, and it's from this empire and whatever, I'm just like, I can't grasp it half the time, because it's not a part of my history, and it's just something that I'm just uber fascinated about. And then of course, now being a writer, I'm like, I got to write about this. This is so cool. But like, where did it come from for you? Because I mean, like, for me, it was the obvious. It was the Indiana Joneses of the world, and later it was Uncharted and Tomb Raider, and National Treasure, I know, is a big one for a lot of us. But where did it start with you, where you were just like, because I know you're very ingrained in the action adventure stuff and the archaeological thrillers, and that's just something that's always been, a thing for you. So it's like, where did that come from?
Well, before I answer that, I will say that we don't have here in the States, we don't have ancient history in the traditional sense, in that we don't have giant temples built in the Bronze Age, and we don't have cathedrals that are 1,500 years old or 1,100 years old, and old cities that have been around for a long time. But we have another history that in some ways is far more mysterious and more interesting. Last week on Sunday, I was down at the Etowah Indian Mounds.
Mm-hmm.
And like Graham Hancock briefly, I mean, for a split second, just showed the Etowah Indian mounds. At the very end of Ancient Apocalypse in the last episode, it was one of like a bunch of places that flashed on the screen. But the mounds that are there are over 1,000 years old, most of them, or some of them. There was a city there that had a wooden wall around it that 5,000 people lived in. DeSoto wrote about it during his expedition through that area. And those three main mounds there each had big mansions, and one had a palace at the top of it. And underneath them, they're effectively ziggurat type pyramids, right? So they're step pyramids. But what a lot of people don't know is that there are older mounds around that area and over in the hills and the mountains not far from there that experts are now saying date an additional 1,000 years or more back, right? So now we're talking about time of Christ. Now we're hedging towards late Middle Bronze Age with some of the stuff that I've
Sure.
read and seen, and people I've talked to. They've said as far as 2,300 years back and maybe more. So we do have a history, but it's covered up, and it's covered up in, you know, the European-based history books that we studied in high school. And this is one reason I love guys like Graham Hancock so much. Is he's, you know, we're not trying to ignore what the things we do know that did happen. Columbus did come here,
Sure.
but most of us know now Columbus was not the one that found this area over here,
No.
right? I had somebody say to me, you know, just yesterday, I had a YouTube video. One of my audiobooks, Norse Directive. I've had this comment from multiple people that there were not horses in North America prior to the Spanish. I have multiple sources that prove the contrary of that. And yet mainstream historians and people who teach this stuff in accredited universities and high schools still teach that we didn't have horses before the Spaniards arrived. That's simply not the case. In fact, we have traces of equine animals here going back tens of thousands of years. So you have to dig deeper. There are new articles that I've found. I mean, I shared that article with this person who was trying to correct me. But you know, there are a lot of there was one person that Secret of the Stones talked about seafaring boats that the Egyptians had built, right?
Yeah.
And this person was like, they didn't have ocean capable vessels. They were only river goers. And I'm like, really? Well, please have a look at this link to an archaeological discovery in a barren desert where a massive harbor used to be around 4,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago, right? And this harbor had enormous ships that were far larger than anything that the Nile River ever played host to. But thanks to the climate change back 4,000 years ago, which has been ongoing since the Ice Age, right? It's been getting hotter. These lakes have dried up. These harbors have dried up. Connections to oceans have dried up. They found all these boats, and they weren't just ceremonial ships, right? And it's entirely possible that the Egyptians were crossing the Atlantic Ocean and coming over here.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know how many times I've written about when the Sahara Desert was a part of the Mediterranean, and it was water. I mean,
there was jungle 5,000 years ago.
Yeah, but there's that famous, what is it? The whales of the Sahara. What is that? There's like I think there's like a show about it where they're finding all these whale skeletons, beneath the sands, and it's like they didn't crawl up onto shore. These are whales. These are modern whales. These aren't like the dinosaur predecessors. These are whales, and the riverbeds that they constantly find, when they're doing the radar scans and stuff, they're finding riverbeds, under the sand, and you're just like, no, it was a very plentiful,
I guess I just don't understand, like and Graham Hancock deals with this a lot, and I
Hmm.
would love to ask him why he thinks this is, because it seems to me like these sort of histories are being suppressed by someone, right? Pushed down by angry mobs that like to be right and never want to be wrong. But it's got to be deeper than that, right? Like, why wouldn't you want to know? Why wouldn't you want everyone to know? Oh, well, back then there was a jungle in the Sahara and it was connected to the ocean. It was part of the Mediterranean, and the Egyptians had seafaring boats, and we've had horses here for 12,000 years. Like,
And the
what?
Norse were here far long before the
Yeah,
Spaniards.
right. What
Yeah.
is wrong with people knowing that?
I
There's
love how they
nothing
say
inherently
The
bad.
Norse went to Canada but never came south. What, are you kidding me? They just decided to stop. It's like, no.
It's
It's like,
wild. It's
yeah,
wild to me. And then you'll
probably
have
because people
three.
just don't like to be told they're wrong.
Yeah,
I guess, or
I
academia doesn't like to be told it's
it,
wrong.
it can't be that simple though, right?
Yeah,
Like, is
no,
it? I mean, is
or
it
it's
really?
just not as conspiratorial as we want it to be.
Well, but then that's the other thing, though, right? So that's the
You
other
know?
side of it, because you and I think of conspiracies,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of
And by the
course.
way, we're not crazy with our red strings. Like, we
No.
follow money, we follow actions. Every conspiracy that you and I come up with are extremely logical. Like,
Oh,
it
sure.
makes total sense. But in this case, I can't even think of a conspiracy as to why they would want to hide this stuff. And
Yeah.
I can think of a lot of things, but like, I can't figure out like what history cabal would be trying to suppress this, and why would they be doing it? It doesn't make any sense to me. So we're left with the only explanation, which is just ego,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
So
that's the one thing I know you use it too. Is everybody uses it? Is that's the one good? I guess it's the one good thing about the nature of man being
yeah,
selfish and violent,
yeah,
and it's the tendencies of some people, and it's what makes a great villain. But in this case, it might just be selfish and just I don't know, because like you said, there's no reason for us to be like, well, no, blah 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 came to what is North America 10,000 years ago. Well, no, that's not right. Well, yeah, but why can't it be? Like, what's the argument that it can't happen
yeah.
or
And then
didn't
you get
happen?
into you'll see five pieces of evidence that point to that being true,
Yeah.
and then they will try to point to one gray piece, right,
Hmm.
that could potentially disprove it. And it is very strange. The whole thing is really strange to observe, and it's super weird that they've gone after Graham Hancock in so many just
Yeah.
obscene ways. I mean, he just had to cancel an event in Asheville, North Carolina, that he was supposed to attend, because I don't think that he felt safe going there. People have accused him of out of nowhere. People have accused him. By the way, I'll get to your question in a second, but
It's,
I haven't forgotten it.
no, you're
People
good.
have accused him of. They've called him a racist. I'm like, but he married a woman of color. Like they've accused him of being this or that, and the reality is, he says it in Ancient Apocalypse. I don't claim to be an archaeologist, or I'm just a journalist looking for the truth. That's exactly what we need more of in a lot
Yeah.
of places, in science and politics and everything. We need journalists that are just looking for the truth. And more importantly, we need people who are willing to listen to objective truth,
And
right?
maybe that's a
Because
big problem with him, and it is like this in a lot of fields where our culture is set up that we have to have an education, we have to do this, we have to do that in order to be qualified to do this. Or you can just work really hard at it and get better than the person that spent 7 years in college that is now 7 years behind learning the job.
yeah,
And both
yeah,
are correct. Like both are fine, depending on your field, I guess. But still, like he's not an archaeologist. He's not doing this. He's not doing that. And yet he's finding more answers than archaeologists do because he's putting
yeah.
in the work. He's putting in the time. He's investigating. It's like there's nothing wrong with that. It's like maybe it's just people are butthurt that they're that like you
He's
said, maybe it's
following,
just ego. Maybe it's just human nature. I guess I don't know.
he's following in the footsteps of great people in that, like Thomas Jefferson, for example, was a
Hmm.
self-taught architect, right? He didn't go to college to learn architecture, and yet he designed Monticello himself. Like he did it all himself. Um, Paul Stamets is world's foremost expert in fungi and mushrooms. Like he's classified new new species of mushrooms or new not species, but whatever the trickle down part of that scientific
Yeah, yeah.
is. I can never remember the species, family, blah blah, all those things. But he's found new
Genus,
ones. He's
genus,
found
like
yeah, genus, whatever
yeah,
it is.
yeah.
He's found new ones. He's classified new ones. He is the most he's the world's biggest expert in mushrooms and fungi, including the psychedelic ones. That's his specialty. He's self-taught. He didn't go to the university to learn that stuff.
Hmm.
He found something that he was passionate about, and he learned more about it than anyone else. And Graham Hancock's the same way. He's I think that, through some of his fictional works, he started asking a lot of questions,
Sure.
and that journalistic instinct in him has caused him to seek answers that are being roadblocked deliberately in a lot of places. It's a strange thing to see, and to see them attack him with such vitriol it's frankly it's sad, and I'm afraid that it's sort of a mirror of what's going on in society right now, which is people that like nah, 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 boo, boo,
Yeah.
name call, name
And
call,
that
name call.
leads, and that's even more, more credence to like secret society stuff with Illuminati stuff and this and whatever, where there's someone with an agenda, in this case, in the historical world, that is just like, no, this is history and this is the accepted history because we are doing this or because of this. It's like you said, it's what it feels like. It feels like things are purposely being blocked in some ways
Yeah,
for some unknown motive.
yeah. Well,
It's very, yeah.
there have always been, and probably will always be, groups of people that are desperate to maintain control and authority. And one of the things that I've been asking a lot lately, with because I'm a Christian,
Hmm.
but I see a lot of uproar against Harry Potter, and it's the devil and all this stuff, and people would say, oh, you shouldn't even have a pretend magic wand and blah blah. And I'm like, let me ask you something. What is a magic wand? Well, it's a piece of it's a piece of wood that you wave around to conjure magic, and magic's of the devil. Okay, so let's just pull that devil out for a second and just say it's magic. It's a power, right? Yes. You wave that stick around and it manipulates that power. Great. Didn't Moses do the same thing with a piece of wood?
Him and his brother.
Right? Him and his brother,
Yeah.
but
It
struck
was
the
a
rock,
family affair.
and water came out. By the way, there's a myth with Poseidon that he did the same miracle
Yeah.
at the base of the Acropolis in Athens, that he struck it and water came out, right?
Yeah.
And so it's okay for Moses to wave around a stick that is a lot like a wand and make things change and do different things. But it's not okay to tell stories about children doing this, for the greater good, by the way. They're
Yeah, I mean,
trying to
think about
fight
it.
the
I mean, this is
forces of
where the can
evil.
of worms can be opened because
I know, I know. I don't.
if you take belief in religion out of it, what was Jesus Christ?
Right.
He was
He
a
was a
sorcerer. He was a
magician.
magician. I mean,
Yes.
I'm just saying, it's like, but we are taught, who he is, and we're taught that he's obviously the good guy. He's the lamb.
Yes.
He is, but it's base element. It's base argument. He's a warlock. It's just like you're sitting here going,
And that's
so,
heresy, by the way. That's blasphemy.
oh, I know.
But and what I always say when people say that to me is, According to who?
Yeah.
Well, it's according to the Bible. It is not according to the Bible. It's
No.
according to the organization that compiled it.
Yeah. It's,
But why is it that we
man's.
have,
Yeah.
why is it that, like, my denomination would say what I'm saying is heresy too, but whatever, they're not infallible. Why is it that my denomination and many others accept the Dead Sea Scrolls as authentic scripture, and yet we don't study them? Why? Well, because in the Dead Sea Scrolls, fallen angels have sex with human women, and that makes people squeamish, right? That people don't like that. It also has a lot of empowering stuff. The Book of Enoch, for example, and how he traveled the universe with the angels and learned about technologies and things that nobody here had ever even considered. And then he returned, right? We're not told that in the the canonical stuff in the Torah and those things. So why? Well, this is why secret mystery schools were established, and why esoteric secret societies were established, and they've been demonized, and by me too, in fiction, right? Like I demonize some secret societies in my fiction. But the reality is that it's entirely possible that they're not really the bad guys. There's like a strong tie with occult stuff to Satan, but there's a significant differentiation between the two, right? If you study the stuff that the Rosicrucians understand, for example, everything they study and teach points to God and points to Jesus' teachings and deeper versions of them. There's no worship of darkness. There's no like trying to sacrifice, children or animals or anything. There's nothing like that. And yet they've been demonized because why? Same reason Graham Hancock has been demonized, right? Yeah. There's an element of control and authority there. And I branched off into a 20-minute segue from your question.
Well, I mean, you still gave us a lot of answer, honestly, because it kind of no, it does, and the way that you talk about it, and how passionate you are about it, it's obvious. You just have a deeper love for just history in general, let alone our country's history, or a random country's history in Southeast whatever. So it's like I'm the same way, where I follow a bunch of different pages on Instagram, for instance, and I'll see so I just saw a picture of what is it called, Whale Rock, 3 Whale Rock, and it's gorgeous, it's magnificent, and I'm just like, I'm enthralled by it because of just like, it's beautiful and it's odd looking, and it's you're sitting here going, like, where does that kind of stuff exist in the world? You know what I mean? It's like, or how does it, and I mean, yeah, it's a natural formation, blah, 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 but it's just, your mind just starts running with possibilities and ideas. And I guess that's also just the mind of a creator. But yeah, actual physical, like influences, like I guess we'll say media influences, that have kind of like helped you along the way, or at least helped spur you into, becoming a writer.
So before, finally, we come back to your question. My bad. Yeah. Before I saw Indiana Jones, before I read a Clive Cussler book, before I played Tomb Raider, which I loved, and Uncharted too, loved it. Before any of that, I was at my grandfather's house on my mother's side, and I was over at their house, and they had a lot of old books, and one of the books they had was Ancient Wonders of the World, right? And I don't know if I still have this book somewhere. I found it rummaging through their things. My grandfather died in 1985 from a heart attack, and then my grandmother shut down and just never was the same. Really didn't even talk much after that for like 15 years. But after she was gone, I went through a lot of their things, and I found some of these old books that had inspired me as a kid to really take an interest in history. And the Ancient Wonders stuff was really, really cool to me, because we had these things that we know existed, or we're certain they did, just based on based on a lot of oral tradition, based on some textual evidence, but that it's just, they're gone, right? The
Yeah.
seven wonders of the ancient world are those things would be incredible to find
Yeah.
real evidence of those things, and not just leave them to lore. And I always thought that was such a cool book. And then he had another book that was I can't remember the title of it, but it had to do with uh, lost and hidden treasures here in North America and in the United States, mostly dealing with outlaw stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That outlaws had robbed a bank and hidden something here, or that kind of thing. And so then I found other books like that in my grandfather's stash, that treasure hunting type books, like where's this treasure now,
Yeah.
and those
I
kind
would
of things.
peruse. I would go to Barnes and Noble and go to the clearance section at the front.
Yeah,
Where you would find some of your big box authors.
yeah, or
And
like
like I
Kevin
found Matthew.
Tomlinson's
Yeah,
books.
yeah.
Or
I was
Nick
saying, like,
Thacker.
yeah, well, like I would like that's where sometimes I would buy James Rollins stuff after it had been out for a year. I'd get the hardback and go, oh, I got the hardback for like $8 or whatever it ends up being. But I would also go to the reference section, and you'd have all these atlases, you'd have all of these ancient history books. Like I still have a bunch of them, these reference books, and you just flip through it, and you're like, you get lost in it, because it's one of those things where I guess I just go back to what it was I just don't understand it because I'm not a part of it. Like I'm reading the reference of it all, trying to understand and trying to figure it out, and I can't, and it bothers me. And it's
Yeah.
like it bothers me that I can't figure it out. And then of course, what do? You go on the deeper hunt. You go on that deep dive, which is scary nowadays. Some of those research deep dives that we can get into,
Sure.
but what about like fiction authors and stuff? Because I mean, we all had our favorites. Like I mean, one of my favorites before I started writing, I've talked at nauseum, was Jeremy Robinson's original stuff, his old stuff, Matthew Riley.
JR.
Yeah, Matthew Riley's Jack West Jr. series. Dealing directly with the seven ancient wonders of the world, and like that kind of stuff where it's just this big, massive world that they create, and I try to do the same thing now.
You're doing a good job with it.
Thank you.
And following in those guys' footsteps is you could do a lot worse. I remember emailing Jeremy when I was just starting out in
Mm-hmm.
2008ish. I'd finally decided, maybe 2007, finally decided to start writing my first novel and actually finish it. And I reached out to him because I knew he was independent, and asked him if he would give me some advice. And he answered me, which just shocked me.
Yep.
I emailed Barry years later. I emailed Steve Barry because I hadn't started reading Steve Barry's stuff yet, and then somebody read my first book and they're like, "This is a lot like Steve Barry's," and I was like, "Oh, I should check this guy out." So I emailed Steve and didn't get a response back from him. But Jeremy did respond, and he told me, to do this job, you have to work harder than anybody else, right? And
Yeah.
you have to constantly be working, constantly be trying to make things, make the next story better. Just really cool that he responded. And,
Yeah, he did the same thing with me. I mean, like I said, I was a beta reader for him before I ever became an author.
that's
You know,
right. Yeah,
I
you
was
mentioned
doing
that
I was doing
once
artwork
before.
for him, and I was, it was great. And then realized that writers are just people with
Yep.
creative thought. And when I decided to start writing my first book, I mean, there was a group of guys that I always thank, which is Jeremy, Sean Ellis, Ken Gilmore, Kent Holloway. There was a lot of guys from that group. A lot of his co-authors. That's how I met David Wood.
Word.
Yeah, and really just started bouncing ideas. And what do you think of this as a plot, or what do you think of this as the character? Just because I didn't know how to develop a story, and
Mm-hmm.
and I was always impressed, especially Jeremy. I was always impressed with how quickly he got back to me and how helpful he was. And even now I'll message him. I don't talk to him as regularly as I used to, but I'll message him and say, "Oh, this looks great. I thought you would like this," just because it'll like, like, "Oh, this is so funny. You wrote about this 15 years ago or whatever." And
Yeah.
he'll message me almost, I don't want to say immediately, but he'll message me pretty much, soon, and he'll laugh about it and he'll go, "Oh my God, that's hilarious," and whatever. Like, I mean, and that's what kind of got me started, was seeing that, like, it's another version of me. It's just a regular guy that decided to tell a story.
Yeah.
And that's what made me want to do it more, because I'm like, oh, I can do this. I can do this. It wasn't like, oh, I'm never going to get published. I have to start, the cliche of running around Manhattan with your printed out manuscript and getting denied by 400 different Like, I realized none of that is true, not
Yeah.
anymore. And I'm like, oh, that's exciting. That was like, oh my God, this is like, and then, now 9 years later, I don't know how long I've been doing this. I can't remember.
It all runs together. Well, for me,
9 years, 9 years, 2004. First book was released in 5, but I started writing it in 4. Yeah.
There you go.
So 9 years. Yeah.
Well, so for me, it was, what got me interested in the genre was the things I talked about before. I was already interested in that subject matter as a kid.
Same.
And then I saw Indiana Jones, and then I played Tomb Raider, and then Uncharted, and National Treasure way later on. But
Yeah.
So I've always liked that stuff.
You say way later on. National Treasure is 20 years old.
I know. No, I know.
That hurts.
I know. So yeah. So but those things really sparked my interest in that, in entertainment in that venue. So
Yeah.
So it started with the real interest in treasure hunting and finding artifacts, and not even for the money part. The money part, like, you find something or whatever, you might get a reward, or you might, whatever, how that would look with a treasure find, I don't even know. But because there are so many ways that governments and states and nations and all that stuff, like, if you find something, it's theirs or whatever. So there's a lot of weirdness that goes on with that sort of line of work. But for me, it's always been more about what it would feel like to find something that hasn't been seen in 500 years or 1,000 years or 2,000 years, stuff like that was seen and touched by human eyes and hands, and that hasn't been in such a long time. That to me, it's like a spiritual thing. But so I had that passion, and then I never really read anything in that vein. Like, I got started reading with fantasy, with Dragonlance Chronicles. That's what got me interested in reading. And I still love fantasy to this day. But I think that as far as literature is concerned, the first book that really got me switching genres was Count of Monte Cristo, which is sort of a treasure hunt. It's a big revenge tale. It's influenced a lot of the revenge stuff that I've written into my characters. And, somebody, I think, who was it? My wife maybe might have said that it's extremely vengeful. It's like super dark how vengeful he was. And I'm like, yeah, I can relate to that. And I don't know what that says about me, but don't cross me. But then after that, I found, I don't remember how long after it was, but I picked up the Da Vinci Code.
Yep.
And when I read the Da Vinci
Angels
Code,
and Demons, Da Vinci Code, yeah.
Yeah, I read Da Vinci Code first, and then Angels and Demons, and I was like, okay, I have tons of ideas like this. Like, I have a lot of and a lot of knowledge about stuff like this, and I read about it for fun.
Yeah.
And then I was like, there's got to be other writers like this guy that writes this sort of stuff, or Indiana Jones type stuff. And that's when I found Clive Cussler, and it was like 2004. Like, I had never really read in that genre before, so I was late to the party when it came to the reading side of those things. And then once I started reading Cussler, I really liked him, and how, like, Cussler's like watching an action movie. It's like a Transformers movie. It's totally unrealistic, right? There's a lot,
Yeah.
like, falling over a cliff and holding on with your fingernails while you're holding on to somebody else who's also got a 50-pound backpack on, and like you couldn't hold yourself up, much
Yeah,
less like
physics
another
don't
person.
always have to exist, I guess.
Yeah, the realism. I like that though, because
Yeah.
it's fun to read, it's fun to watch,
Yeah.
and so, but he does mix it in with real research and locations and things like that. So I loved that, and so I got into him, and then Rollins, of course, and then years later I started reading some of Steve Barry's stuff, and I even, in one book, because our stuff is so similar, and Steve's originally from Atlanta, or he lived in Atlanta a long time. He might have been from Charleston, but he lives in St. Augustine now. I included a little Easter egg tribute to Steve in the Norse Directive and his bookstore that's in Kottmullen's bookstore that's in Copenhagen. So,
Oh, cool.
so and I've had some emails from people like, "Hey, was that a nod to Steve Barry?" And I'm like, "Yes," because I really like the way he tells stories. I think
Yeah.
he's great. But
Oh,
so yeah,
I
that
had a
answers.
book where my character was reading about an ex-Aussie SAS with a Skywalker mechanical arm. And people are like, well, that's obviously a Jack West Jr. book. I'm like, yep, that was the point. I needed to make it really obvious.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I did. I do that all the time. Oh my god, the pop
Oh, yeah.
culture references and the
Yep.
this I can't not do it because
No.
that's how my brain thinks. My brain will go, oh, that's like from this, and
Yep.
I'm like, oh, I mean, if I'm the writer, I'm also the character, at this point. So
Same.
why not include him into there? So
I do the
um,
exact same thing.
yeah, same thing. I mean, and speaking of that, like we talked off camera with writing processes and stuff, and how it can change from story to story, kind of, I guess, just based on, honestly, for me, based on the feel of the book. But we were talking outlining, and so in this case, outlining versus pantsing. I know you and I are more traditionally, we lean more towards that pantsing, just kind of like get into the story and then just let it come, let it go. But we were also talking how there is a very, very helpful helpful thing with outlining as far as like story development, especially with some of the stories as we try to make them more and more complex.
Yeah,
So,
it's helped. I'm using more and more outline stuff now
mhm.
because of that, and also, I've always been a big proponent of using a roadmap to know where you're going. So
Yeah,
I would always have a shell of an outline or a fence that I could play in.
yeah,
But now I'm trying to do more detailed outlines so that the I can really work faster, but also um, I fight laziness, right? Like
yeah,
I have pretty substantial attention deficit. So my ADHD begs me to pick up my phone and check it for no reason, right?
hmm,
Or to get up and go get a drink of water when I'm not thirsty, or go get a snack when I'm not hungry, just so that I can avoid doing what I need to do.
yeah.
And
Regardless of what the task is, it's not even.
doesn't matter, but
It's just
especially,
task. Yeah, just
yeah,
tasks. Yeah, yeah.
but especially with writing, and it's extremely difficult to deal with, and it's been really challenging for the last 15 years or whatever since I started doing it,
Hmm.
and especially since I've gone full time in 2015 when I went full time, it actually got harder. So I
Yep.
have more time on my hands, so that's more time for me to screw off and get distracted, and so
Yeah,
I'm
especially when
all.
you're home all the time. There's always other things you could be doing.
Yeah, I need to
Yeah,
do this. Like, I'm going to do this now. Oh, I should go check this. And so it's a constant battle.
yeah,
And having a good outline, I've noticed, helps rein that in a little bit. But I also always resisted creating an outline up until recently because um, the laziness didn't want me to do that either. Like, it didn't
sure.
want me to sit down and spend the work, spend the time doing spend the effort, um, creating this thing, And then I use the excuse that it's not productive because I should be writing words for the story. I shouldn't be
Same.
like just
100%.
planning all the time. And that's
100%.
true. You shouldn't just be planning all the time because then you're not doing it. Like if you can read all the fishing magazines in the world, but until you go fishing for real, you're not a fisherman, right? So you do need to sit down and write the story. But I think that getting rid of that laziness and that procrastination that's kind of wired into my brain, and just sit down and do the outline, or like I told you before the show, it helps me to go for a walk and just talk through the outline.
Sure.
And do the story, the chapter beats that way. It's been very helpful because now I just have to sit down and I have to act out the story because I know the direction. So
yeah, like it's always getting the story set up is always the hardest part. Physically writing the story, once you're in the scene and you're living in it, that's what we do. I mean, that's what's fun for us. That's what's easy for us, is when I'm in the scene and I'm in my character's head and I know what I'm supposed to be doing, the words just fly because that's just a part of it. But it's getting all of that set up and figuring out where they go next and the logistics behind it. I'm very big when it comes to travel logistics. I like to make it as realistic as possible, and if it's a difficult travel from there to there, I like to showcase that, because you can do the classic, I know I've done it, where the classic hero drop, where it's like, oh, now he's in this country. Well, it's like, what happened in between? It's like, I sometimes get a little bit too deep into detail with stuff like that. But for me, it's the journey. So why not include some stuff like that, especially if I can build in maybe a little humor or a little more research on the area. Why not? That's just, that's healthy fat for the story. But so
healthy fat for the story. Is that what you said?
Yeah, healthy fat.
Like an avocado for the story.
Yeah, it is. It's good cholesterol.
Almond.
It's good. Yeah, it's good cholesterol. Well, because if you cut out all of the quote unnecessary things to the story, and all you have is this streamlined start to finish, to me, there's no flavor.
No.
And that's where,
right?
Yeah, the healthy fat is in my case necessary. It really is, because it does kind of help with those parts where, like you can't be, 110 miles an hour the entire time, but you also don't want to have it screech to a halt. So it's like, how do you get to one thing to the next? And sometimes those fat parts is kind of how you kind of come down from that high or build up to that peak, and like driving on a mountain road and seeing a little coffee shop on this stand and, oh, let's get some coffee. Well, now I can include this area as, what do they serve? How's the weather out right now? What's this? What's that? And I'm like, well, if I'm traveling in these countries, I want to be able to pull back and just like go, wow, this is like incredible. This is cool. And that's somebody that doesn't travel a lot. So I guess maybe that's why is, I
it's
appreciate
roller coaster physics. You have to have that, the roller coaster physics. You have to have, you can't just go downhill all the time.
No.
You can't just be 90 miles an hour. It doesn't work that way. You have to slowly climb the hill.
Yeah, you really do. And not everything can be an episode of 24 where it's, but in media, that's the allure for that, was that it's just from start to finish. It's that like crazy boom, 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 boom. But that for like entertainment for like an hour, that's fine, because then you get your breather and you're done, but for a book that could be 300, 400, 500 pages. Eventually the reader gets, a little sweaty. They put it down. They're like, okay, I got to stop. I need, putting down the book is the worst thing possible. But, so what about outside of this? Like I know you, but as far as outside of all of this stuff, outside of the work, outside of this, I know you're huge into sports, especially Atlanta sports. But like, and I know, like we do Disney vacations and stuff, and we're a very big fan of the food festivals at Epcot. But like outside of this, like what is Ernie doing when it's not actual work?
I love festivals in general, by the way. Like that's the thing I miss most about Europe, and I haven't been over there in a while. But I miss the like little town festivals in Germany, and like it seemed like there was a different festival going on in a different town or a different village every week, and I thought that was just so cool. Is celebrating something right all the time.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing when I'm not writing, uh, well, I'm usually playing with my kid, and then from my free time my free time is at night from about 9 to 11 p.m. When she goes to bed at 9. I can do some of the things that I want to do. What do you mean you don't want to play with your kid? Yes, I want to play with my kid, but I can't play Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 with my kid in the room, right? Or I can't watch the Braves game because she doesn't care about baseball, or I can't watch the soccer game because she doesn't care about sports. So the things that I really love doing for me are done in that like 2 hour window at night. So usually I'll play my Xbox for a couple of hours. Well, not for a couple of hours, for like half hour, and then I might watch a show or might watch a movie with the wife, stuff like that. We just finished Mandalorian, although I hear there could be a secret episode dropping today.
That would be interesting, because all I've heard so far is the movie that Dave Filoni is going to produce and direct. So
yeah, so
that's all I've heard.
Yeah,
cool.
I don't know. I've read some interesting stuff about Pedro as well.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But I like Ted Lasso a lot. This is the final season of that. I've been watching that. I watched half of the recent episode last night of that. So I do that. I'm just, just usual entertainment stuff. Sometimes, very rarely, I'll go out and meet a friend to chat or whatever, but that usually doesn't happen. It's usually just me on the couch. But I also, like, during my work day, I work out 5 times a week. So I'm always hitting the weights, or mostly body weight exercises, or doing some cardio and
Sure.
that sort of thing. But yeah, I just have it's a pretty boring life, actually. Nothing exciting.
Yeah, well, that's also, I mean, that's me too. But at the same time, that's I guess, the low key, preference, lifestyle is like every time not every time, but I mean, I've been there a few times. Every time I'm in Tennessee or Northern Georgia, and I'm in like mountains, I'm like, yep, this is me. They're like, what would you do for fun? I'm like, absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But I want that. I'm okay with that. I am not that outward, even though I was in retail for almost 2 decades. I am not that outward. I have to be around people. I have to be talking.
No.
I have to do this. That's not who I am, like, personally. That's what I was, because that's what I did.
Yeah.
But
I have friends that are that way, that they're like that. They can't not be around a lot of people. And I'm the same as you. I'm like, no, I'm good. Pretty simple.
Yeah, same. Well, especially now. I mean, look, we're talking. I mean, you're in Chattanooga. I'm in Wellington, and I'm basically 14 hours from you, 12 hours from you, and we're sitting here talking. We don't have to go out. We don't have to do anything. So, I mean, that is the one thing that I guess a lot of the lockdowns, what it created was, it did kind of create a more of a global community. Because, like, I host a podcast with a buddy of mine who lives in Newcastle, Australia. I mean, he's 14 hours ahead of me. He's in the future, and
I had a reader from there.
He's in New South Wales, Newcastle, and that's where Rich lives, and him and I do a podcast together, and we talk, a couple times a week. We're talking and on StreamYard. And that's not possible with I mean, technology in general, but just, I think the mentality of it is like, this is available. This is easy. This is, cool. It's nice to do, instead of sitting there texting or messaging all the time. It's nice to be able to actually talk. And like some of the authors that I've interviewed, like Kent Holloway, I've known Kent longer than any of you guys that I've had on, because of my relationship with Jeremy. And I got to talk to him for the very first time live. And I was just like, wow, this is cool, because you knew me before I was a writer and that kind of stuff. And, I would have never been able to do that. And it's, I like doing this, but I think it's the community thing, where it's like, I can sit here and talk to people all day, and I love doing it. I just don't really want to go out and do it.
No.
It's not the talking part; it's the going out and doing something part.
Yeah, when people say to me, "Hey, why don't you come out and meet me for a drink?" I'm like, I'm good. don't
I
really feel
mean,
like
I have
leaving
a
the house.
brewery right down the street from me that I'll go to and meet some friends at occasionally, but it's 5 minutes from my house. So I mean,
That's
it's
that's about my cutoff.
yeah,
If it's 10, 15, if it's 15 minutes away, I start questioning if it's worth it. Like if it's 10
yeah,
minutes, I
yeah,
know 5 minutes is just getting out of my neighborhood and out to the main road. So the other
sure,
5 minutes, I'm like, okay, I guess. But if people who like are going downtown to downtown Chattanooga, that's 15 to 20 minutes, and it seems forever away from here. I'm like, no,
yeah.
probably more like 25 minutes. But yeah, no, I'm not interested. I'd
Yeah, I
just
mean
rather
the way
stay here.
Wellington is built is we're on the whole town is on like the southwest corner of two of the biggest like highways in the area, sort of major roads. So it's like you go north to get out of Wellington or you go east to get out of Wellington, you have everything at your fingertips that you could possibly want when it comes to, Costco's and different, grocery stores and retail and restaurants. And so I don't have to go anywhere outside of 10 minutes if I don't want to. Like I could literally live a happy life without leaving my house from, driving for more than 10 minutes and traffic depending. So it's like, I guess I'm also just not in a super rural area where I have to go somewhere to see anything. I am kind of like right in the middle of it, and it makes life easier because I don't have to go anywhere for too long if I have to go anywhere at all. But
Mhm.
I like to kind of wrap things up, which is going to be a whole nother conversation, but it's an interesting one in general because if the person listening or watching on YouTube doesn't know where to start with your stuff, or like, oh man, I really, but you have a lot of content out there. I do, Nick, Kevin, there's a lot of us out there who are, that are prolific, and we have a lot to choose from. um, where would you point a new reader to and be like, this is an Ernie book, this is Ernest Dempsey at his core, this is, if you want to know who I am and what I produce, read this.
Yes. So it's funny, Secret of the Stones is my first Sean Wyatt book, and if you're interested in diving into that series, it's probably the best place to start. It's also not my best book, and nobody's first book is their best book. I know that
No.
Nick Thacker, rewrote and rewrote and rewrote some of his first books until they were better. Um, and I did do some of that. Like I did have newer edits done and things of that nature to
Yeah.
make those early books a little bit better. But for if you're interested, it just depends on what you're interested in. If you're interested in the archaeological thriller stuff, like the Indiana Jones National Treasure type things, then Secret of the Stones is a good place to start for my series in that genre. If you like more like a Lee Child, Jack Reacher kind of thing, or like Mark Dawson type character, um, John Milton, or those kind
Hmm.
of guys, or Mitch Rapp, those
Sure.
types from Vince Flynn, those kind of characters, then you should read The Courier, which is the first book in the Relic Runner series. And I think
Hmm.
if you're interested in that sort of stuff, you'll really like that series because it's completely unique. There's not really anything out there like it. There are characters like him, but they're not doing the things that he's doing for the reasons he's doing them.
Sure.
And so
Okay.
I think that that's a unique spin on that genre. And then if you're into folklore and legends and mysteries and things that go bump in the night, and you want to see bad guys get their comeuppance in violent ways, then read the Gideon Wolf series and start with Emergence, book 1, and book 3 comes out 28th, and so we're still early in that series, so it won't
Hmm.
take you long to catch up. That series is also different in that I write it in the first person. The other two are in third person. So um, kind of a Jim Butcher style of writing. Um,
I
but
love
yeah,
writing in first person. It's just it's very 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 like it can be very dangerous.
it's difficult,
It's difficult. Yeah. It
especially
is, but it's not. It is and it isn't, I guess.
yes, I know
Yeah.
exactly what you mean. It and
Because you
it's
can be vague because the character doesn't know everything. If you're in the first person, the world that you're creating, the character only knows as much as he knows.
That's correct, and that's what's hard. And
Yeah.
you can't show. So I do a lot of transition scenes in the other two series, right, where you chapter or 2 or 3 with the good guy, then a chapter with the bad guy.
Yeah.
Right. You can't do that first
You can't
person.
do that
So
first
you have
person.
to, everything is, it's playing out in that POV, and it's different to build the depth of the villains without putting yourself in the room with those villains.
Exactly.
And anybody else that's an ancillary character or whatever. It's challenging, but I enjoy it, and I enjoy being able to bounce from one to the other because it kind of keeps things fresh.
Yeah, and what I like about first person too is it inherently keeps it fast paced and suspenseful because everything's happening in the moment. You know, it's you're not telling a story. You are the story. You're in the story.
Right.
You know, that was my biggest problem with as a writer starting out writing traditional third person past was I'm like I feel like I'm reading a story to somebody. You know, I'm telling the story to somebody, and that's the whole show versus tell thing, right? So it's like, you know, if you feel like you're telling a story to somebody, then you are. If you feel like you're showing a story to somebody, okay, now we can, you know, once I kind of got that through my thick skull, it became a lot easier because I just inherently liked first person present better because I just felt like it's all happening in the moment. It's more fun. It's more fast
So you do
paced.
present tense first person. I do the past tense first.
Oh no, yeah, my Frank Moon series, my Unseen books, my post-apocalyptic kind of monster stuff is first person present.
I'm gonna have to check that out. Yeah. I'm not put off by first person present.
I've never done first person past, so that's interesting for me too.
I did it one other time with 2 books that I wrote called The Dream Writer, and it has a very small cult following, that series. There's only 2 books to it, and people every now and then I'll get a message asking when I'm going to write the 3rd one because it's been 9 years maybe 10 years since I wrote the 2nd one.
Okay.
And I left it for room for a 3rd or whatever. But
I guess it would be more like investigatory, like police procedural stuff, like where you're like recounting a mission or recounting a situation, I guess. Like I could see first person past working with that too, just because, you know, like he's being interviewed, like a debrief, and he's kind of, why I did this, I did that, and blah, blah, you know, I'm like, okay. So I guess in my head, I'm going, I don't know where personally I could write in that style and make it work, but so yeah, anyways. But, and then the other question I have is, a book recommendation written by somebody else, and whether it's fiction, nonfiction, whether it's something you just found really entertaining or something that just had a profound effect on you that you would love people to check out.
Other than your work, you mean?
Yeah, no, I mean like
Conspiracy.
Roosevelt conspiracy. Yes, I know. Thank you. But yeah, so I mean, like, you know, I always, you know, mention, you know, I've talked about them on this show. A lot of the guys that really got me going into this industry were my favorite authors. They weren't just, you know, mentors and friends, you know, but, you know, like the Antarctos saga from Jeremy Robinson is probably my favorite series ever written. And, you know, it's very different from anything he's produced and very different from anything I've produced, but it was just 4 or 5 different genres packed into one, and it was entertaining and it was fun. And,
Cool.
you know, but like it's not, I wouldn't say it's a profound effect on me as a writer because the content isn't really what I do, but as a consumer, I was just so enamored by it. So I don't know if you have, you know, I mean, you can spout off a few if you have, but just like stuff that and we talked earlier with the reference books and with, you know, Cussler and those kind of guys, but was there anything that was like, wow, this is like incredible? Like The Lock was like that for me from Steve Alton. When I read that was ridiculous, in the best way possible.
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I think my favorite book of all time was The Count of Monte Cristo, and I've said that before, and
Which is totally fine because I mean that was something that really did have an effect on you. I mean that was a big influence for you.
It was a huge influence and a huge impact. I remember reading it at the beach when I was down in Florida visiting my girlfriend's family in like 99, maybe. I don't know. I was reading it and they kept getting pissed off at me because I wouldn't socialize with them and hang out with them and talk about pointless things. I just wanted to read that book. I couldn't put it down. And they wanted me to like go walk with the manatees. And I'm like, no, I'm going to sit over here and keep reading this book. And so I got into a lot of trouble with her at the time, but it worked out because we didn't stay together. So I think I won, with, or at least the book won.
The book
So,
the count one.
but for me, it was so gripping. And, again, like recently, like last week, a friend of mine was like, that's just such a, like almost a psychopathic story of way that he did everything. And I'm like, it was beautiful. Like everybody that ever wronged him got what they deserved. And, but more than that, and I know as a Christian, I'm supposed to believe, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I know that. I'm not saying I'm going out and getting revenge, but I love reading good revenge tales. And,
yeah, as long as there's a line of entertainment versus like influence on me.
Yeah.
It's entertaining. I'm not saying I am taking notes, but it's. I guess I am for content purposes, but.
But what really the story to me was more than a revenge story and any of that stuff was the immense amount of detail that Dumas put into everything. So like, yes, he was getting revenge against this character, right? Mm-hmm. But he had to learn so many details about that other character and their lives, their homes, their occupation, their spouse, their children, their horses, what they looked like
the depth was
so much detail, but detail in a useful way, because you'll see writers do detail for the sake of detail. Even some of the guys that you and I've talked about that we're big fans of, I use this joke a lot about describing an oak desk in 3 pages to describe an oak desk, right? Like you don't need 3 pages of that, and it doesn't contribute to the story unless you're going to drop that desk onto someone, right?
Yeah.
Or you're going to use that desk in a meaningful way.
Yeah, like for me, that was my problem with a lot of the Clancy stuff. Was the early like the Rainbow Six stuff and that kind of stuff, where I'm like, there's so much density and detail to it that I honestly can't grasp the story, and
right. And that's something I continued to try to hone. And my editor left some comments in this most recent Crimson Winter about this very thing, because I've been working on doing it better and better with every book, taking the details to the next level and making them meaningful. So I described this old fishing guide in, I don't do heavy descriptions, and yet readers tell me, your descriptions are so great. It feels like I'm right there. And I'm like, but I don't do heavy descriptions. I do try to make sure that you feel things like the humidity or the heat or the surface, or you hear the sounds that are there, you see the things that are there, the colors there, and I try to engage the 5 senses. The smells are really powerful. But when it comes to certain kinds of things, like a person's facial features, for example, their facial features can tell the story of their life, right? Mm-hmm. The wrinkles, the dark, tan to it, or, the way their hair looks, the way their eyes, the bags under their eyes, or their how skinny they are, or how large they are. There's so many things that can tell a micro story about that person and their struggle and, in their journey, right? And you can do all that stuff, but why would you do it? Right?
Yeah.
How does it impact the hero's journey? And so I think it's, or how can you beautify the hero's journey with that description, right? Because otherwise you're just describing a desk and taking 3 pages to do it, and there's no relevance to that desk whatsoever.
Yeah.
So
I think it's also that I've always been enamored with action adventure, and action adventure is supposed to be looser. It's supposed to be not as heavily detail oriented, you know. So I think that's
yeah.
also just my I have to remember to include more detail because I like you know, I want to move, I want to go, I want to, you know, I want to just,
Yeah.
and sometimes you can, you know, how do you do all this detail while your hero is running for his life, and you're like, you know, that's where you have to like sprinkle it in and do it right, and it's hard because I don't like my hero to not be moving, you know. Sitting is terrible, you know, like, so, but you have to make the sitting part entertaining in some way, and you know, so that's where I need to, and I still do, try to work in detail, and like you said, in a better way, in a way that it works, in a way that it fits. Um, but and real quick, this was actually something I wanted to ask you earlier, and I forgot. Your Dak Harper series. I was just curious. I guess this is more of just me as a writer. The way you introduced Dak was very unique in the shorts that you released, in his origin story. But you did those first before the career. And I know a lot of authors, and myself included, you know, you'll get the character established, and then you could go back and do an origin story.
Yeah.
But you kind of went the other way. You kind of and you released them individually as their own release, and then eventually you now have the collection. What was the decision process behind that? Because you don't see that a lot. You don't see a character introduction done that way.
No, and that's a great question, Matt. First thing you have to understand is
Because I
I'm
might
smart.
steal it. I might steal it.
Yeah,
No, I'm
well,
kidding.
the
But
first
no,
thing that you have to
it's cool.
understand is I'm smarter than everybody else.
That is true. Yes, you are.
And
You're
so
ahead of the
then,
curve everywhere.
yeah, so if you just strive to reach my level of
Hmm.
intelligence and brilliance, then it's just going to happen
Yeah.
organically.
Yeah.
How it actually how it actually played out was I'd been writing the Wyatt stuff in some spin-offs for that for a long time with Adriana Villa, and there's more of her stuff coming at some point. I keep getting asked when she's going to get a dedicated series, and that will happen. But with Dak Harper, I wanted to make sure that it was something that my readers wanted. So I did a pilot episode of one of 6 short stories that fit into the whole origin story, right? And I wrote, it was 18 or 19,000 words, I guess. So for the whole story, it's like 120,000 words, but it's book 1 was like 18 or 19,000. I wrote it in like a week or so. And I put it on BookFunnel, and I sent it out to my readers, and I said, hey, you can download this story for free. Sent it out to like 25,000 people at the time, and said, this is a free story. Tell me if you want more of it. And if you want more of it, then I'll write. I have a plan for 5 more that completes this guy's saga that will lead into a bigger series of full-length novels. This will be his origin story. And if you like this character and you want more of it, then please tell me. And that way I won't waste my time writing stuff that you won't want. And and that's what readers love, that, because they had input with it, and they were involved with that whole process. And look, I don't need to spend time writing stuff that people don't want. And you know, that's not going to be helpful for me. It's certainly not. It's a waste of their time. And so that's why I did it that way. So the pilot, everybody really liked it. They said, please write another one of these. So I got about 60% of my Sean Wyatt fans are pretty diehard Relic Runner fans now. So that's how I did it. And then book 1 followed, and I think I gave all 6 of those books away for free at one point, those short stories, to my readers, and I dripped them out over a couple of months, and did it that way. And then I compiled them all into the origin story, the omnibus of that. And so people who want to read the Relic Runner, they can start with the Courier and read the full-length books and then go back and read the origin story, or they can start with the origin story. Either way.
Cool. Cool. No, that's awesome, because like I said, I was interested because I see it all the time, and I've done it where, you have your established character, but you're like, okay, well, what were they like before this? And
Yeah.
then, it can open up a whole new series because of that. But the way that you did it with it doing it first was just unique to me, and I never asked you about it, actually, strangely. And,
You're the first person to actually ask me that question.
oh, cool. No, because I guess, and that is the business side of it, where you do it and I do it, where you're checking on your buddies, you're checking on your authors, you're checking on the guys bigger than us, seeing what they're doing, because usually what they're doing, if it's successful, well, maybe I need to be doing something similar, because that's the trend, that's the wave, and we obviously we want to set the trend, that's ideal, but at the same time, there's a lot of, like, I stole putting an archaeological thriller as the subtitle of my books from you, so
Yeah.
when you started doing it with your Sean Wyatt books, and I sat here and went, this is what I write,
Yeah.
but I call them adventures, which is not wrong, but I'm like, but that's the subgenre they really belong in. They're action thrillers, but they're not traditional historical action thrillers. And I'm
No.
like, an archaeological thriller just makes sense. I mean,
You know where that came from, right?
No, I don't actually.
I'd never seen the phrase before. I'd never. So I'm going to claim that I coined it, but
I'd be fine with that.
because I don't. I'd never seen it.
There's a few of us that are now known as archaeological thriller authors.
Yeah.
That's what's so funny. Like you,
Right.
There's Kevin, there's me, there's you, there's guys.
Yeah.
There's like archaeological thrillers is what we write. It's like it's a genre. It's a subgenre that
Yeah.
I guess we've grown over the last however many years.
Well, Tomlinson and I were at the NINC conference years ago, and I think it was the first time that we'd actually met in person. And we didn't really know each other, so he sees me from across the room, comes over. I didn't know anybody at that conference at the time. So there's this little old me, with my hands in my pockets. And so Tomlinson sees me and he comes across the room, starts talking to me, and he's like, so I think that we write in the same genre, and I think this was how the conversation went. We write in the same genre, with the action adventure, treasure hunt type stuff. And out of the blue, like I was tapping into the Akashic record, I said, yeah, archaeological thrillers. And he's like, I like that. That's perfect. I said, yeah.
It is.
He goes, did you just come up with that? And I said, yeah, I did just come up with that. He's like, we're going to use that. So Kevin and I kind of came up with that.
Yeah. As I said, you two are the ones that I saw. I mean, it's the first thing I saw you. And then as I got to know Kevin more, I was looking into his work. I was like, yep. And I'm like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that it seems my memory is a little all over. I may have used that term once before I used it with him, but I don't think so. I think that's the first time I said it. And so,
That's awesome.
So Kevin and I, we started putting that on everything, and then it grew. But what's funny is, I remember distinctly before I started using that term, I would try to describe what people ask. Well, what kind of books do you write? Well, it's this and this and this and this and this. But what I noticed after when I just started saying, oh, I write archaeological thrillers, people are like, oh, like Indiana Jones and National Treasure. So I didn't have all the stuff I used to say, it was implied by those two words. So it seemed to
It does. And honestly, this is also the behind the scenes thing. It also helps with the viewability of the title on Amazon. I mean, it's the searchability of the words, and it's an action adventure. It's an archaeological and thrill. And I'm like, it makes sense. And I know it's so funny because there's only so many people I can talk to about that get it and understand it.
Yeah.
And that's And like I said, when I saw you probably just republished stuff and changed the titles, and you were adding the subtitles to some of your books, and I saw an archaeological thriller, but then you also have Sean Wyatt Adventure, and I'm like, Well, I already call my series the Jack Riley Adventures at the time because that's what they were, because they didn't feel like traditional thrillers. So what else
Right.
could I call it? And I'm like, yeah, but adventure can sometimes sound too juvenile.
Right.
So I'm like, and I saw archaeological thrill. I'm like, oh, that was perfect.
You're welcome.
You're
You
welcome.
know what, Matt? It's funny because none of us ever like. It's so rare to ever think of anything somebody else hasn't thought of,
Yeah.
but I do
Especially
feel
when
like
you
I
write
did
in the
on this one.
historical realm, there's only so much. There's
Yeah,
only so
I
much
feel
content.
like Kevin and I did it on this one. Like
Yeah.
I don't. Maybe it's somewhere else beforehand. There's nothing new under the sun, but
Well,
you
if
never
you
you never
search
know who
archaeological
invented.
thrillers on Amazon, there's only so many that come up.
Yeah,
It's still not widely used, so you could probably trace it and figure out, who's maybe before you and Kevin. But at the same time, it's like, there's a few of them out there now that do it. Like I know
but
Luke
there's some big
Richardson.
names that do it now.
Yeah,
It's
there's big guys
funny.
out there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's what's so funny is I'm like, man, I wonder, because it kind of popped up all of a sudden, and then I'm like, and then I know it from you because I went out of my way to when I was looking at your stuff one time, and I remember distinctively seeing it, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. But I never went further than that to see like who else. I just decided to start doing it. So it wasn't like, oh, I wonder who else does this.
Yeah.
Maybe a
Well,
year or two later, I was looking up other archaeological thrillers on Amazon, and that's when I saw Kevin and saw a bunch of other people. But yeah,
well, it doesn't matter who invented it
no,
because it's not
it
like I'm
works.
getting a nickel for every archaeological thriller out there that's sold. That would be
No,
sweet.
all we need is a subgenre to publish under on KDP or something, or where we can actually choose archaeological thriller instead of historical thriller or this thing.
Yeah, it's not in there yet. So
No,
just
it's
have to write
yeah,
it in there.
we'll have to write it in there. Yeah. So, Ernie, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really do appreciate it. This was
This was
great catching
fun.
up with you. Yeah, it really was. It really was. I really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people are going to nerd out with some of the stuff we were talking about because it was like the really, really that deep dive conversations we were having with like history and stuff. But if you have guys like you and me on a show like this and we don't talk stuff like that, it's a disservice in my opinion because that's what we've built our quote brand on is the history stuff and the
Oh
archaeological
yeah.
thrillers and the adventures and that kind of stuff. So, if anybody has any questions for you or just wants to know more about you, where can they find you online?
So you can find, my website, ernestdempsey.net is one place. I really do. I'm really active on my YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
youtube.com/Ernest Dempsey, or you look for my handle at Ernest Dempsey. I do a lot of stuff over there on my YouTube channel now.
Yeah.
I'm putting out new videos every week, very often shorts about
Mm-hmm.
history stuff. But and I love engaging with the comments over there
Yeah,
and
and you do YouTube lives, your nighttime one and then your breakfast one. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, twice a week. Drinks
yeah,
with Dempsey on Fridays at 4:30 Eastern usually, and then
mm-hmm.
Coffee Nation on Sunday mornings
Yep,
and 9
yep,
a.m. Eastern, and just to engage with readers and hang out and talk about stuff. That sometimes it's books, sometimes it's history, sometimes it's sports. It's just or movies or shows. There's no format to it. It's just hanging out
yeah. It's
and
just reactionary based on what a lot of the comments end up being. That's why I like doing the Facebook
yeah.
lives with authors. It's just we react to the comments and then it just spurs conversation.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
lastly, the other place where we're real active is on Facebook, and there's my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Ernest Dempsey. But from there, you can dive deeper in with other fans into the Dempsey's
Mm.
Hunters and Runners page, where we have it's run by Allison Valentine and
Yep.
James Slater, and they do a lot of great contests and competitions on there for free goodies. Sometimes it's an autograph book or
Yeah,
different little.
Allison does this wonderful the written interview stuff that she does
Yeah.
with authors. You and I have done it a few times.
Yep.
She's wonderful. James is awesome. I know both of them pretty well, and yeah, that page is great. The Hunters and Runners. That's a great page.
Yeah, and it's
That's a
all
fun one.
fan driven.
Yeah,
It's people posting cool articles about something that happened in archaeology, or like we said, the contest. There's lots of cool interaction with fans that are fans like you and me. So
Yeah, definitely. Well, cool. Very good. Very good. And like you said, as of recording this show, you have Crimson Winter coming out tomorrow on the 28th, April 28th. And you said you are currently working on the next Relic Runners book, so that will be your following release, I guess, sometime this summer.
yep.
So that's awesome. So any roundabout time that we should be looking for that, give or take?
Relic Runner 6.
Yeah.
I'd like to get it out before the end of June. We'll
Okay.
see if that happens. I
Yeah,
don't like
it's
doing July 4 weekend releases because
no.
it's never good for releasing stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe mid to late June, but we'll see.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll keep an eye out for it. But like I said, once again, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll have you on again at some point.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks. Appreciate it.